So Bob, let's go into the general topic of consulting a little bit more, and also business in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think is the typical career progression in consulting, particularly in Kenya where you're a consultant? And is that typical of consulting everywhere else?
I will start with a few caveats. One is I can't speak for everywhere else because I haven't worked in everywhere else. Two is when you say consulting, we're probably talking about a very particular type of consulting. Consulting is a very big word.
Strategy consulting at MBB. Let's make it specific.
Because there's management consulting, there's technical consulting, there's all types of consulting. Let's say management consulting in MBB. There is a very defined career path. I'll speak of. Let me start from the sort of lowest tenure to the highest tenure. So most companies have an analyst or a pre-analyst position. When I say pre-analyst, it basically means that some of the institutions have put in place special programs to get people in. Unlike developed markets, consulting is still a relatively new thing in Africa, maybe with the exception of South Africa. Some firms have seen it in the best interest in order to get local talent, is to create some of them are called fellowship programs, some of them are called management training programs, whatever the case might be. Essentially, you get into that, you get into an analyst position. Some have senior analyst positions, some do not. And then you go up to associate level. The difference between an analyst and an associate is essentially the level of trust that someone has in you and the amount of work you do. So if you say the problem is 100, it's this big, an analyst might take 10, associate might take 30 or 40. So it's both the size and the autonomy that you have. Within associate or general associate positions, some people have junior associates, some have senior associates, some have junior as mid and senior associate, and some don't even call it associates, but essentially it's sort of the same thing. After associate or senior associate, you have the manager position. The manager is the first time, I think, in your career progression where you have to manage other people other than yourself. Essentially, you are managing three parties. You're managing the client and the expectation. You're managing the partners and the expectation, and then you're managing the team. It's a very difficult position it can be a very difficult position depending on your personality, your experience, and the project you're dealing with.
And normally, does it happen like that when you get that title, you get those responsibilities? Or is it typically, you get the responsibilities first, as companies love doing, and then, later on the paycheck, like maybe 1 or 2 years later after you're fired?
No. So in most firms, they have a defined track and they have a defined period within which you're supposed to have been promoted. For you to get promoted in any of these firms, you have to prove that you should be. And how you prove that you should be promoted, essentially you are acting in or having the responsibility of the next position for a while. Typically it's not anywhere more than a year. Typically it's 6 months or less, depending on your performance, because also, again, if you are struggling, some people want to give you a bit more runway so that you can get to the position. I've seen most people at 6 months, because the reason it's 6 months is not because people are sort of don't want to give you the position. It's just again, it's such a structured program that promotions only happen at 6 months. At 6 month cycle. So if you miss the last one, you have to wait for the next 6 month cycle.
Right. But it sounds like quite a lot of free labor that the company can get out of you, on that basis. And everyone wants to get to another position, otherwise they wouldn't be probably working in that position. Maybe there are exceptions, people who do not want to progress, but doesn't that mean that everyone is doing a work that is a level higher than them currently?
I mean, you're right in that people that are typically in these organizations are very, very motivated. Is it free labor? I mean,
by the way,
they're
it's
paying.
not just consulting where it's like this. I've found other industries, even scientific consulting and engineering, has the same concept of you need to be doing the job for half to 1 year. But I question whether that's a good thing to do on the employee's behalf, or could they be better off by just changing companies and going straight to that level when they can be doing it now? If you have the confidence, you have the backing of management, you have a reference that you can get that you can do that, and you know you can do it, your team knows you can do it, so why are you waiting half to 1 year with free labor?
So if you in that particular instance, if everyone knows you can do it, and of course you can do it, then you should already be promoted. That I've seen that happen. As to whether it happens in other institutions, they of course, let me put it this way: an organization will not hire you if you create less value than they pay you. There's no one works for free. Obviously, you can't call it free labor if they're paying for you. But I get what you're saying. They're underpaying you. However, fundamentally, you always have to be underpaid. Otherwise, it makes no sense to hire you economically.
For a sustainable career and for sustainable business. However, I think we live in a world, in the reality, which is you can get hired for doing something that you cannot do, and either learn on the job, or not be good at doing that job, and someone discovers that later on. In reality, I found it actually is that way, and you will see a lot of people in the industry who probably shouldn't be there, but they still are.
Yes. So let's dissociate. There's being fairly paid and there's being underpaid. These are two different things. So fairly paid means you are getting the right level of compensation given the other market factors, level of experience, all that. Being underpaid, economically underpaid, is what I'm trying to say is that you have to create more value than you are being paid, so that So that's what I mean. As to what you're talking about is another situation where people have a skill to work mismatch, which is a different problem. So I don't think I think those are two like mutually exclusive problems, where if someone has issues if someone does not have the right skills for the type of work they're doing, obviously there should be structures in place to see whether or not they should stay in that position, be moved away from that position, be transferred to a position which has better skill. A good organization will have those structures. Does it always happen? Probably not. There's some obvious. I know of cases where people continue to be in positions where there's a skill to job mismatch, but there's this. We are trying to make a perfect world, which we should always aspire to, but we'll never get to.
Doesn't the nature of employment at MBB Strategy Consulting firms promote people who are trying to reach as high of a level as they can, survive that for 6 months, and then they drop out and move into another large company where they can get a very respectable and high level position, probably as high paid or maybe even paid even more than what they were making at McKinsey. And doesn't that become a thing then? Everyone's coming in, just bullshitting their way up the ladder and then exiting.
I can see how you can create an I guess called perverse incentives, essentially, where what you're trying to build and what actually happens can happen. However, you need to realize, I guess, most of these institutions are institutions that have been there for 400 of years. Of course, you will never know someone's true intentions. However, there is a lot, which I can't unfortunately get into the specifics, but there is a lot that goes into whether or not you should be given the next position up the ladder. It is not just you are good enough, go on ahead. There are other things, and if you are the sort of person who's just trying to make it good enough and then leave, a lot of you get caught out. It's very I found in my life it's very hard to be lying consistently. There's always inconsistent.
I've seen a lot of people lie consistently and make a career out of being disgenuine. I think in today's work environment, it is possible because there's always a cover you can hide behind. There's always a new narrative that you can come up with, and you're talking about some of the smartest people that even I believe probably on the planet that are all together. So I'm just wondering, do you not see these power plays and these strategies to promote themselves over business and over everyone else play out? Because I see them in other industries, undesirable industries.
I would say they probably play out. So I can't speak about other industries. I would say there is always going to be an aspect of politics. There's always going to be an aspect of imperfect information because you don't know who people are. However, as I said, there are, as you put it, if this is the largest concentration of smart people, we also know that it's sort of a what type of game? What was that? Game theory. That's the smart people, so you're not going to do something that's also to your own disadvantage. Most people also, as I mentioned earlier, are very, very genuine. People just actually are there trying to do the good, like with most human beings, they're trying to do the right thing. They are very smart, very highly motivated. So in general, that's not a problem that crops up. Again, this is also a bit of a recruiting thing. But yes, there will always be those situations. Is it the norm, or is it just the exception that proves the rule? Probably is the latter, I think.
Yeah. What are careers in African nations like? Is anything changing about the work culture in? And apologies for generalizing here, but because there are lots of people around Africa, not necessarily just Kenyan, maybe the cultural region of Tanzania, Uganda. What is that work culture like, and how is that different from what you've seen so far in the UK?
Okay. Yes. A couple of disclaimers. One, I have not worked in all 50 plus countries. Even within one country, depending on the industry, the region of that country, it can change dramatically. I would say, highly generalizing here, that the main difference I have seen is that in a lot of the Western markets, and I only have experience in the UK and in US, right now, as of April 2022, it is more of a...
It's May now.
Oh, it's May. Okay, as of today it's May. It is more of an employee market in that the employees are getting have a lot more power to decide and to lay claim and to give, to put their cards on the table and have them be respected. And employers are having to accommodate a lot more the employees. In a lot of places where I work, the unemployment numbers are very high. The level of development is not very high. And there's a lot more people chasing for much fewer jobs. So it's an employer market, and employers can basically set the terms a lot more than they can here. Obviously, there's also things like social protections, employer protections are not as well developed in a lot of these markets, which can lead to, again, perverse incentives to set up organizations in certain ways.
The fact that there are new legal implications that employers need to now keep in mind to satisfy all of the potential employees, doesn't that just make everyone else's life worse off? Because now these employers are potentially not going to hire as many people, and they're already not hiring as many people.
You're talking about the West, where you're now talking about the non-African countries where there's a lot of social protection. Well, let's put it this way. I will speak with a lot of bias here because of my background. I am very pro protection because I have seen what lack of protection can do. I've seen
in Africa or around
in a lot of around the world, but most of my experience has been in African countries, and a lot of people I've spoken to anecdotally, the lack of protections has meant that they have been in a lot of situations, both compromising and not, that they should not have been. And I am very pro. I think of course, every time you increase the level of legislation, you're making it harder for business and the ease of doing business. But I think it balances out, in my mind at least. The pros outweigh the cons of doing it. I think in a market that's this as developed as the UK, it is much easier to complain about it because it's, if you think about like Maslow hierarchy of needs, there's a lot of, you're nearer self-actualization, so you can think about all these various issues because all of the institutions are protected.
I mean, I don't think the UK is probably a good market to compare with. But if we compare it with another developing nation of the last 50 years, China, and how lenient the government was to businesses, and we saw the rise of Alibaba and all of these firms with that. Then in more recent times, the Chinese government changed their mind on how much leniency they're going to give businesses to determine their path. So from that perspective, wouldn't African nations be better off if there were less protection and there is a free market for employees to leave a job and then go into a new job, versus putting the restrictions that trickle down to the employees' lives? I'm just wondering, just an open question.
Maybe
until it's developed enough.
China is always an interesting sort of exception to the rule. I think you need some basic social protections. I'm not saying you go as far as the UK, but you need some basics that enable. Going
as far as the UK would take away the entire growth of the African nations.
I think you need some basic protections for, as much as businesses might not like them from sort of economic profits point of view, you need it so that you have a thriving ecosystem of businesses and things being set up. As I said, I'm not advocating for the UK. I was just using it as an extreme example, but I'm also not. I don't believe that you can't have zero, because I think zero is chaos. So somewhere between chaos and full-on everything, China might have been in there, but even then, you're seeing, right now, as you said, the Chinese government is trying to rein in a lot of these sort of companies that had free reign. So it seems like somehow, however you go, you kind of end up. However, the Chinese system, by the way, is very different. It's a very different type of democracy, and a lot of
democracy.
I'm using the term very loosely.
Government.
I don't think a lot of the African nations are modeling themselves to China. Economically, they might try to, but not in terms of how the government has direct control in everything. So it's more likely that they'll model themselves in Europe or the US.
And do you think the fact that I'm assuming Kenya is a democratic nation and aspires to be a strong democracy? Again, an open question. Do you think that holds it back rather than a nation like, for example, if you take Middle Eastern nations that are highly centralized, have probably more public relation issues than Kenya does? Kenya is probably on the opposite end of that, trying to do good. Would it have been better off if there was a centralized entity, driving everything and making things more efficient?
There could be. What you need is it's called a benevolent dictator. So the problem is that out of every 10 dictators, how many are benevolent? 1, 0.5, 0.2%. Do you want to take that gamble? There have been very few, I think, in recent history. I don't want to mention a few, but there's one in the Eastern African region that has been very, very, very good and very clear about driving economic development, and they've done a fantastic job. The question then becomes what happens after this person or centralized authority leaves. There's a power gap, and then you have issues again. I think long term it is less risky and more sustainable to be a sort of democratic open nation rather than a central authority. If you go down the central authority route, most countries, most African countries, unfortunately, have not had a great time, to put it mildly, with dictators. It has been to the detriment of the economy. So I don't think it is. It is definitely possible, and it's definitely one way to do it quickly. It's too risky. I don't think people have trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the question is from a perspective of do you think that is because I see India trying to do the same thing, trying to give everyone a voice. However, on the other side, as a neighboring country, there's China that doesn't do things that way, does it in a different way, and it's been arguably way better off by doing things that way. They both started in a similar place. So I'm just wondering if there's a better way of governance that Africa could be looking at. Do you think that should be explored? Or
It should definitely be explored. I don't know how you'd put it up in a structure that people agree with, because well, I guess if you're having a central authority, not everyone has to agree with it. I just the history has taught us in Africa that it's never a good idea to have a strong, well, unfortunately it's always a strongman government. It leads to a lot of perverse incentives, going back to a lot of family wealth, corruption is built up, even if you do prop up the economy. And also you just are not sure if the next person in that chain of power will have the same motivation. So I would love for it to happen that way. It's just A, is not going to be politically feasible, and B, it's
probably never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. It's an interesting thought experiment, but I just don't think it's going to happen. And I'd see even in the thought experiment, I would see why some people will be fundamentally against it.
Yeah. And from your perspective, we hear about the growth in quality of life, and especially GDP, but particularly the quality of life in Kenya and the countries surrounding it. Is that the way you've been seeing it, during your work? Because you're quite an international worker living in Kenya, so you have a good observation of what's happening around the rest of the world. Is that how you see it? And do you see it continuing to grow sustainably?
As a human species, we are probably the highest quality of life that we've ever been. If you look at child mortality and all, deaths from communicable diseases and all this type of things. However, in Africa, we're still dealing with the basics. We still need to get the basics right. It is improving. It's probably not improving as fast as it should be. There is a lot of work that needs to be done on the fundamentals. I'm talking health, education, agriculture, food security. This basic stuff that needs to happen has not yet happened. Is it improving? Yes, probably. If you look at the metrics, is it improving enough? You find, if you draw charts of a lot of things, you always find, with the exception of maybe some African countries, sub-Saharan Africa average is always like the sort of exception at the top right hand of the chart, which tells you that there's a lot of things we need to work on. It is slowly catching up to the world average, but that's how averages work. You always need numbers below and above, and I don't think it'll ever catch. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll ever catch up, because I don't think it's growing fast enough. But if you look at the absolute numbers, are there less child mortality deaths than there were before? Yes, there's a lot of work happening. Are there less malaria deaths? Is there better, hospitals to population ratio? Probably yes. If you look at the metrics, but they're nowhere near the level that they should be.
Yeah, and besides child mortality, what do you see as being the largest roadblocks to good quality of life in Kenya?
In Kenya, I think there's a big issue with how efficient the government allocates resources.
Yeah,
there's a lot of, to put it mildly, rent-seeking that goes on. There is a lot of I think, now this is now where it goes from objective to subjective. I think there is a lot of sort of showmanship in terms of, let's put big infrastructure things to show the electorate rather than things that make it better. And a common example that's often cited is, we'll build dual carriage highways but not build a public transport infrastructure system. So there's a lot of things that could be done. There's also a few things around health. There's a few things around Kenya, not so much education, because Kenya, I think if you look at Kenya versus other it's a lot more people are literate. But if you look at the sub-Saharan average, the level of literacy in some countries is still pretty low. There's some things that, like, we made education free. Some other countries still not. The quality, while education is free, what quality do you get? There's a lot of, like, as I said, basic things like sewage systems are not the best. Sanitation, water. There's all these fundamental building blocks that you need to have a good quality of life is not yet there. I'm trying to give concrete examples.
Yeah, and do you think they come together? Is that why you think of all of those as being bunched up together? Do you think all of them will come together? It's not like you push forward one and everything else follows.
Yeah, I mean, every country and every politician has their things, or a set of things that they look up to that they're looking forward to improve. I think a lot of them come together. If you think about, even just because we're an MBA, let's think about building a business. If I wanted to build an educational technology, I want to do good ed tech platform in Africa or in East Africa, a lot of these places I want to go to, I simply can't, because most people think, oh, they don't have smartphones. It's a lot more basic than that. They don't have electricity. So how do you build an edtech platform in a place with no electricity?
Yeah.
You have to, and a lot of these are sort of you need the government to come in, because there is no business model, no matter how you fashion it, to build. So you need things to build upon. If you're building a health tech platform, if there are no doctors or community health workers, you can't build businesses upon. So that's why I think there's a lot of things that are basic and that you can build upon.
Yeah, and they need to come together.
They need to come together.
Okay.